Hello and welcome to the Retro Odyssey podcast. I'm your host, Steven, along with my co-host, Matt. How's it going?
Not bad, thanks. How are you?
I've been all right. Just, a lot of working. Um, you know, you know how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been working through a heat wave over here in the UK.
Yeah, and it's even worse for y'all than it is for us.
Yeah, we haven't got air conditioning. I've got the tiniest little bay window in this attic room right now.
Yeah, that's one of the few really good things about the American South is AC is standard in all houses.
Mm.
Um, Not so much in the northern part of the country. You'll find a lot more houses built similar to the UK, where they're designed to trap heat because they usually don't get this level of heat. But even still, they're still a little bit more modern design than some of the places over there. So y'all still have it the worst.
Yeah, but at least I can set up fans and stuff if I need to.
That's basically what we do. Is we have fans everywhere. But I've been playing. I've actually been playing a bunch of stuff. Um, I never did end up getting back to Final Fantasy 14. Like I did that I finished off that one section I had been working on when I stopped, and then just haven't gotten back to it. Um, I've been playing some more Fire Emblem, just kind of jumping around between a couple of them. I started playing. I started playing some of the Spider-Man games because I went and watched all of the Spider-Man movies because I wanted to watch the new Doctor Strange, but I went back and watched, you know, most of the stuff leading up to it, which because of Spider-Man No Way Home means watching all of the Spider-Man movies.
Mm.
So I'm back on a Spider-Man kick. Other than that, I mean, it's, the same stuff. I don't think I've played much Mass Effect since last time we talked. Yeah, it's just, the same. I did play a little bit of Vampire Survivors. Still haven't tried out the Limit Break or any of that stuff, but no, I'm sure I'll get there. I did start the Assassin's Creed Black Flag, the pirate one, and that's a lot of fun.
I've heard good things about that one. I've still not played an Assassin's Creed game.
I've enjoyed all the ones I've played, but every time I go to play the series, I get to three and stop, whether it's while playing three or after I finish three. So I have actually never played any of the games in that middle section between three and the newer ones. So it's a new experience for me, but it's it's a fun game. It's probably one of the best received in the series just because they had a good concept and did well with it. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. But what have you been playing?
Well, again, I've also been playing Vampire Survivors. It's had a couple new updates since the last time we recorded. A whole bunch of new characters. That limit break feature is really really good. I mean, you can do some crazy stuff with getting all the weapons like really really high. I mean, I've seen people on YouTube doing some like really really stupid builds with it, but these are people who have kind of like several thousand golden eggs on each
Right.
character, which I don't have. Golden eggs, you can get them from runs and you can buy them, and they increase your stats by a tiny amount for each one you get. Like it gives you kind of like a random stat boost. I've got, I think the character that I have the most eggs on has about 100. But a lot of these guys have like thousands and thousands, and that amount of stat boost compared like combined with limit breaking the weapons, which allows you to just keep upgrading like infinitely. Yeah, it gets really, really dumb.
Friend of mine showed me some one where he did like a single weapon run, and I think he was using the two guns, and it literally got to the point where you couldn't see anything on the screen.
Yeah.
It was nothing but weapon effects.
I watched a run yesterday where someone did one with the cats. Gatiamari is the name of the weapon. It just has like a shitload of cats running around and killing stuff. And by the end of the run, the cats were bigger than the screen,
Oh jeez.
and you could occasionally see like a pixelated face of a cat, and it was running at probably about half a frame a second, maybe.
Jeez.
It was really, really slow. But they are actually working on a new engine as well, which will hopefully like have performance increases and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, but I believe they're going to release the new engine like concurrently with the current one because the new engine is going to break a lot of the modding, and the
Mm.
creator doesn't want to kind of like break people's mods and stuff like that.
Right.
So I'm not entirely sure how they're going to handle that, but I believe they're going to have both versions available. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with that. Um, I've also been playing a game that Adam's Adam's been recommending me for months called Tormented Souls. It's a survival horror game in the same style as kind of like the fixed camera Resident Evil stuff
Okay.
and Silent Hill games. And yeah, it is decent. I have gripes with it, but I'm enjoying it so far. It's quite tough, and I have a similar criticism I have with a lot of those early games with limited saves, which
Oh,
I've never been a huge fan of. It wasn't a problem in the Silent Hill games because they don't have limited saves, but
right.
the Resident Evil games do.
Right.
But the problem is kind of like exacerbated here because whilst Resident Evil will give you 3 ink ribbons at a time to
Hmm.
save your game, this game gives you 1 save item at a time.
Oh, jeez.
So I'm kind of at a place now where like I want to go play the game, but I have to think to myself, do I currently have enough free time to play enough of the game to get to the next point where they're going to give me a save item? Which is not kind of a place you want to be. To
Right.
be honest, if my problems would go away if they would just give you like 3 save items at a time, like Resident Evil does.
Right.
But oftentimes when I want to play the game, I just can't go on it because I don't know if I will progress enough to be able to save again.
Right. We got enough. You have to have dedicated time to sit there.
Yeah, and I've mentioned it in the past, but I wish all games had like a suspend feature where you could just turn off your console and the next time you turn it on, you can just start from that point again. It wouldn't ruin any kind of like limited save feature that developers want to put in the games, but
Hmm.
it would just be something where you can just stop at any one point and just go back the next time that you want to turn it on.
Right.
But you know, it is otherwise a fairly decent game. It is very similar to those old games in terms of kind of like style and gameplay. More, it's closer to Silent Hill in terms of the aesthetic because it is like a 3D environment, as opposed to Resident Evil's kind of like static backgrounds.
Right.
I can definitely recommend it. I waited for a sale for it and got it for like £7, something like that.
Hmm. Those games aren't 100% my bag, so I might just check out some footage. but that's just more of a personal thing. Like I do still want to go back and play through some of them because I know some of them are really good. But it's one of those things where I have to get past the controls and the camera angles because that was always my problem more so than the limited saves.
Yeah, the Tormented Souls does have kind of both options. You have tank controls on the D-pad, and you have 3D movement on the stick, the analog stick.
Okay.
But camera changes are an issue because whereas in the remake of Resident Evil, where you had the option to use the analog stick in 3D movement, if
Mm-hmm.
the camera changed and you were still holding a direction on the pad, your character would still kind of like continue to walk forward, like wherever you were going,
Right.
even through a camera change. Tormentor Souls does this as well, but after a couple seconds, it will drift back to the direction you are actually pressing. Say you're pressing forwards and you switch to a camera angle where it's on the opposite side of you. Whilst you will continue to go in that direction, after a few seconds, it will switch back to the opposite direction, um, which can lead to some really frustrating things like trying to navigate around rooms.
Oh, I can imagine.
Whereas the Resident Evil remake will continue going in that direction until you let go of the control.
Right, and I don't know where, but I've come across that before because when I played the original Resident Evil, I had so many problems. Like I think I was playing the GameCube version, and I had so many issues with it. When I was playing the remake for Xbox One, like that concept of keep holding and it keeps moving in that direction through a camera change, like that was second nature to me, and I know I've encountered it before. I just don't know where.
Yeah, but like that is my main gripe with it. Well, that and the save thing. Other than that, you know, I got the game for cheap. I will finish it when I have time to actually sit down and play it.
Right.
But aside from that, and Final Fantasy 14, as usual, that's all I've been playing this month.
Mhm. So yeah, I think that's all we've got. We can. I think we have a couple of news things to talk about, not a whole lot.
Yeah, the first news thing we've got here is last month both of us had a massive brain fart
Oh yes, we did.
because we talked about Secret of Monkey Island, and we managed to go through that whole discussion without mentioning the best part of the game. Um, so we just wanted to talk for a little bit about the insult sword fights, which completely slipped our mind last month.
I don't know how we
Um,
forgot about that.
but it's a really really good feature. Like adventure games, like point and click adventure games, you don't generally have combat because the control scheme doesn't really allow for it that much. But Secret of Monkey Island, you get through combat by insulting the person that you're in combat with, and you have a series of insults and comebacks, and it's kind of like a back and forth between you and the person that you're fighting, and it's a really really interesting way of doing it. Like at the start of the game, you don't really know any insults, but as you get into fights, you'll hear your opponent using insults and comebacks, and after you've heard them once, they get added to your response list. So the next time you hear that insult, you can come back with like the correct comeback, and it will using the correct comeback to an insult will like stagger your opponent, and allow you to kind of like advance on them. And you need to go around and fight a lot of these different pirates, learn all the insults before you can go and like defeat the swordmaster, because the swordmaster knows all of the insults, and if you go in there without knowing this stuff, she's just going to defeat you, and you're not going to be able to get through that fight. But yeah, it is a really interesting way of doing combat.
Oh yeah, it's great. And one of the things I really appreciated was like most of the time when you use a particular insult, they'll respond with the correct one. Most of the time, sometimes they'll do like the standard responses, like oh yeah, um,
Yeah, because the pirates themselves don't know all the responses to the
right.
insults.
But then you take so when you go fight the Swordmaster, she doesn't have the same insults that everyone else does, but you still use the same responses, which I was annoyed by that when I first got there, because I was like, okay, if you're going to give me a call and response system, but change the calls, but then like when I thought about it, it's like, okay, you actually have to think about what you're like what's actually being said, and I actually really like that you're using the established system, but having to put a little bit more thought into it because you haven't been handed the exact answer. You have to figure out which one's right. So I actually really liked that once I thought about it for a minute.
It's essentially like another puzzle.
Right. And then if you go to fight someone else after and use one of hers, they're like, "Hey, that's not fair. You're using the Swordmaster's insults."
I never actually tried that.
Oh, I tried it because I was trying to find out what the answers were originally, and then when they said that, I was like, "Oh, okay. So it's not a different call and response. It's just different calls, and I have to figure out the response." But yeah, it's a really good system, and I don't know if it's in the other games. I sincerely hope it is.
Oh yeah, because I was going to ask you if you knew whether it was in the sequels or not.
I haven't gotten to any of the sequels yet. I actually don't think I've booted it up more than once since we talked.
But yeah, we just wanted to quickly mention that because we both completely forgot about it last month, and
And it's really, really good. It's well worth talking about.
yeah. But other news we've got, there have been a few more SNES titles added to the Nintendo Switch Online
Always good.
over the past month. Kirby's Avalanche and Fighter's History have been added for the SNES. And I don't quite know how to pronounce this, but Deva Story 6 Imperial of Nersatia has been added for the NES.
Haven't heard of that one.
I've never actually played any of those.
Mhm.
Looking at this now, Fighter's History, one of the SNES titles, is apparently the game that Capcom sued Data East over.
Oh, interesting.
Apparently, it is very, very, very similar to Street Fighter 2. And they sued for copyright infringement and lost, but they did actually try. It looks like they lost because many of the mechanics and visual elements were standard for the genre,
Right.
even though it was kind of Capcom that made them standard. So those are now on Nintendo Switch Online. We've got a new release of the Taito's Ray trilogy of shoot 'em ups, Ray Force, Ray Storm, and Ray Crisis. There is a collection of those coming out in 2023. Brand new HD versions being made by M2, who have done a lot of stuff for Sega and a lot of like retro stuff. It's coming out as limited edition physical on PS4 and Switch, and there will be digital versions as well,
Okay.
and a collector's edition with an absolute shitload of stuff in it. That's like 130 quid, which I couldn't really care about, to be
Right.
honest. I've spoken in the past about my thoughts about limited run and strict limited and all that stuff. I'm not a massive fan, but I may pick these up digitally. I do like shmups, and these are ones that I haven't played. It looks like one of them's 2D and the other two are 3D. So yeah, that'd be interesting to have a look at.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of those, but I mean, not surprising. I didn't play a lot of shoot 'em ups back in the day.
I played a hell of a lot, but I'm no good at them. One that I'm sure will interest Adam and possibly you as well is Mega Man Battle and Fighters is coming to the Nintendo Switch.
Oh wait, did we talk about Battle Network uh getting a
Ah,
collection?
it rings a bell. We might not have talked about it on the podcast. We may have talked about it
I think we
online.
talked about it in the Discord. Yeah, they're making a collection for Mega Man Battle Network, which are games that I've never actually played, but I have known about and wanted to try for a long time. They were Game Boy Advance Mega Man titles, featuring a new protagonist, Mega Man.exe. It's all, video games, code, that kind of thing. They were really well received from what I understand. After a while, they started doing the Pokemon thing where they had two releases. It's a cool thing, and they're releasing a collection for, I think, all the major consoles and PC. But yeah, so that's a cool thing for Mega Man fans, especially people who were more familiar with the newer Mega Man stuff, because I know it it it's not like classic Mega Man. I think there's actually a turn-based battle system for some of these. Yeah, that's something that I was excited about, but I don't think we've actually talked about on the podcast. It was announced like 2 months ago.
All right.
So I sorry, I didn't mean to run
No,
over
that's
there.
fine.
So what's the new one?
Okay, so this is two games that were originally released for the Neo Geo Pocket
Oh,
that are now coming to Switch. In fact, they came to Switch like 2 days ago. This is out and available.
okay.
Um, it contains Mega Man: The Power Battle and Mega Man 2: The Power Fighters,
Hmm.
which have been ported over to the Switch. Apparently, it is like $8 for like digital download.
Hmm.
They are the Japanese versions of the games, and I'm assuming there's not much in the way of kind of like text that needs to be translated, but you
Probably
get a
not.
digital copy of the manual as well. And this is the first time it's actually been released in the West.
That doesn't surprise me because I've never heard of this one.
But yeah, the collection is called Mega Man Battle and Fighters, and yeah, it has Power Battle and Power Fighters in it.
Okay.
So if you're into Mega Man, yeah, two games there for like $8 on the Switch.
I might check that out because I've always like I mean I grew up watching the Mega Man cartoon. I've always liked I've always liked Mega Man. I just don't like the original games, but I tend to like all of the games that came after.
Mm,
Um, Mega Man X, X Command Mission, um, the Zero games. Like I like all the games that spun out from the original series. I just don't like the original Mega Man
yeah,
because I'm very bad at 2D platformers.
yeah, I'm with you there. I cannot get on with those games.
The only games that could be called 2D platformers that I'm any good at are Metroid, and that's because it's kind of a different thing.
Mm. I have one more here,
Okay.
and that is that all of the SNES manuals are now archived online at the Internet Archive. Um, they've been put up by a streamer called Kerry Hayes, who goes by the name of Peebs on Twitch, and they had a mission to get a complete collection of every SNES game, which they now have, and they decided to digitize all the manuals for all the games they have like I said, like a complete collection of US releases, and they have been uploaded to the Internet Archive. So you can now have a look at that at archive.org, and every single US SNES manual you can now view for free.
That is great. Like I love when that kind of stuff gets uploaded, and especially for stuff like that where most of the people who had them don't have them anymore.
Mhm.
I mean, unless you're specifically collecting complete in box stuff, you're unlikely to have those old manuals anymore.
Yeah, and he is looking at maybe doing other console collections like later on down the line, but yeah, he's just done SNES as of now.
I like the use of the word just as if it's not
Oh yeah,
massively
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. It's like 650 odd manuals that he's kind of like manually scanned.
That's really cool. And especially for there was a certain type of game made back then where you actually did need to read the manual to know what was going on. I mean, obviously, something like Zelda: Link to the Past, for example. You spend a couple of minutes messing around with it, and you can figure out what everything does. But there were a lot of games on the Nintendo, and then a little bit less on the Super Nintendo, that you had to read the manual to know the story and what was going on. So for those types of games, it's really nice because someone who was born well after they were out of print isn't going to be able to just pull out the manual.
Yeah, just a quick correction. Actually, I mean, he didn't scan all of these himself. Apparently, he reached out to other collectors to try and make sure that there was like a complete collection on there. So not all of them are from his own collection, but like quite a large portion of them are.
Right. I mean, and I mean, for a project like that, I would not blame anyone for crowdsourcing.
Yeah,
That's still really cool. I'm really glad that's there, and maybe they will or somebody else will do that for some of the other systems. I know didn't the Genesis have a lot of good manuals?
yeah, they did.
Because I've seen a few, but I think I remember them being like pretty good manuals. It's just over here they're not very common because I mean not as many people had the Sega systems, even fewer kept them complete in box.
Yeah, but yeah, that is all the new stuff that I have. So you said you had one as well.
Yeah, I do. I have a small one. So we've talked previously on the show about Retro Fighters, the one of the companies that makes modern controllers for retro systems. I think we've previously talked about their N64 controller that was funded on Kickstarter, and then they went on to make a bunch more, and then make a wireless version. They have now made a PlayStation controller. It's called the Defender. It works for PS1, PS2, and PS3. It comes with the appropriate dongles for each. It's wireless. It can be used with a USB cord, and you can also connect it to your PC, Switch, etc. It's a good controller. I've used it a little bit. It's the standard stick configuration for PlayStation, but it's the triggers are much better, like an Xbox controller, and the I mean everything feels really good, and it's got a more rounded shape to it, so it feels a little more comfortable than say a DualShock 3 would. But yeah, it's a really good controller. I don't know if they're doing general orders yet, or if they're still just putting out the Kickstarter rewards. But if anyone needs a good PlayStation controller, that's I can recommend this one.
It is currently on pre-order in a couple places. Found one place selling it for £40 on back order.
Okay.
It's a very sleek looking controller. I quite like the design of that.
Yeah, I really like it. It's one of the reasons I backed it on Kickstarter. It feels really nice. I especially like having the better triggers because that's one of my biggest problems with the old DualShocks is that rounded edge on R2 just doesn't feel good to hit. Especially like, if you're gonna play a shooter on PlayStation, I never really got behind using R1 for the trigger. I always want to go to that back button. So having those better triggers, having that more rounded design, um, really appeals to me. So that's probably going to become my main controller for my PS3. And then I might bring it up and use it on my PC from time to time.
It says it's compatible with Switch as well.
Yeah, yeah, you can use it with the Switch. It might still need the dongle for Switch. I know it needs the dongle for the PS3. I know their wireless ones are always it's like some have dongles, some have the actual connector for the system, but I don't think they have 8BitDo's level of Bluetooth integration. But I mean, still, they make good products. I mean, I own what 3 or 4 of their controllers now, so I can definitely vouch for their quality.
Yeah, and it's always nice when like a higher end third party company comes out to publish retro controllers.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those controllers are like failing and breaking apart, and it's like I mentioned a couple of years ago I got the Retrobit Mega Drive and Saturn controllers.
Yes.
Which are fantastic controllers. They feel just like the original, and you can tell the build quality is like really solid.
I think the main controller Retro Fighters makes that I don't have is the Dreamcast controller they made, which looks a little more like a modern controller than the big block of the Dreamcast did.
Good, because the Dreamcast controller is hideous.
Yeah, and then they also have one for Genesis and Saturn, but it basically looks like they just put handles on the bottom of a Genesis controller with the 6 buttons. So I don't know. I think yours is probably better than this one would be, unless you need that bottom handle. But yeah, I mean, as far as their N64 controllers, they're all great. They do have a GameCube controller, but those are all like they did the pre-order for that, and they still haven't shipped yet, so you still can't order any new ones.
Because I've never really liked the shoulder buttons on the GameCube pad. They feel really springy and a lot stiffer than they should do.
Yeah, so they have actually 2 of them. They have the Blade and the Battler. The Blade has the sticks in a PlayStation-like setup, both on the bottom. The Battler has the sticks in the original GameCube configuration. And then all the buttons are laid out the same. I want to say it's got the extra, the ZR and ZL on both sides. Because one of the things about Retro Fighters is just about everything can be used on Switch as well. But yeah, I did pre-order one of the. Okay, yeah, they have both of the shoulder buttons. I did pre-order one of the GameCube controllers, but like I said, they're still fulfilling those. So when that comes in, I'll give a report on that one.
Cool.
But I think if that's all we have for the news, we can take a quick break and come back with our topic for the episode.
Okay, let's do that.
So our topic for this episode, fitting with I believe the 30th anniversary,
35th.
35th anniversary, is Street Fighter. Originally released in 1987. I mean, I say Street Fighter, you know what I'm talking about. It's a massive, massive series for Capcom. Has spun off, a ton of sequels, a ton of sequels and spin-offs. I personally haven't played a ton of Street Fighter itself. I've played a lot more Marvel vs. Capcom. Although oddly enough, I don't use Street Fighter characters when I play that because I like the other characters better. Although I
Oh
do
yeah, I always go for Wolverine.
I do play a lot of Ryu and Smash. But yeah, the original game came out in arcades 1987. I think it was eventually ported to a bunch of other stuff. MS-DOS, TurboGrafx. Uh, was was there an NES port? I don't remember.
I don't believe there was an NES port. It came out on a lot of the home computers, though. I believe there was a Spectrum version, at least.
Yeah. So arcade, Amiga, Amstrad, Commodore 64, Atari, DOS, TurboGrafx. Okay. Yeah, so this might have like just hit before the NES really got going and got everything. The original game, it's, if you've played any of the sequels, you will recognize a lot of things from the game. It's, it's I made the joke, it's basically Street Fighter but less because it's such a stripped down version because it was the first one. But it is cool to see. I mean, like you look at, Ryu's move list from the modern games and from Smash Brothers, and most of it was in the first game.
And it's also worth pointing out that the concept of fighting game characters having special moves originated in this game.
Yeah, having the Hadouken, the Shoryuken. I think this was the first one to have some of these, and then it also it also didn't have the instructions in the for the moves listed. You had to actually figure them out, which is that it fits with the style of the time.
But to be fair, there was only two playable characters, each with the exact same moveset.
Right.
So it wasn't as complicated as it would later become.
Although what's interesting is I looked through the characters and I didn't recognize any of the opponents.
Well, there are still some returning characters. I mean, Sagat is the final boss for the original game. So he obviously made the move over to Street Fighter 2, and you have a character called Mike, who is clearly based on Mike Tyson, which Balrog in Street Fighter 2 was based on. He originally, in the Japanese version, was M. Bison, and the guy in the red suit and hat was Balrog, and they swapped the names around because they didn't want to piss off Mike Tyson and kind of have legal issues with that, because Mike Tyson will just go to Capcom's offices and bite everyone's ears off. But there is a character called Mike, which is definitely based on Mike Tyson. So you could say that was the first appearance of Balrog.
Okay. I knew a little bit of the M. Bison thing, but I didn't realize, I didn't even occur to me that this was also based on Mike Tyson. But yeah, it's interesting. After you beat each opponent, they say, what strength, but don't forget there are others like you all over the world. They all say the same thing
in the exact same accent as well.
Yeah, the exact same accent, and I don't know if this was intentional. or if it's a result of the audio compression or the tech they had at the time. But they all sound like they're saying it through a face that's been pulverized.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know if that's intentional or just a happy accident because of the sound technology they had to work with.
Yeah, I think it's down to the sound technology because when you win a fight, Ryu will say, "Oh yeah," and that sounds also compressed and terrible.
Mhm. But yeah, this one, I mean, it's been since the original ports, it's been re-released a bunch. I think you can find it on like PSP, PS2, Xbox. The Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection has it, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones like on Windows and stuff. Capcom Arcade Hits Volume 1, Capcom Classics Collection Remixed. Yeah, so it's been re-released a bunch. Odds are you can find somewhere to play it.
Yeah, I played it on MAME. It always strikes my heart with terror every time I need to play something on MAME because it's not an easy emulator to set up and work with. Um, but for some reason, I couldn't get MAME to recognize the D-pad on my controller, so I had to use analog. The arcade used kind of like a stick, obviously. But I don't know if it was actually analog. I don't know if it was just like a digital micro switch thing, because it was really, really difficult to actually control with an analog stick.
Right.
Um, and I managed to get as far as the first bonus stage, which has you kind of like karate chopping some bricks,
Mhm.
but I couldn't get past the enemy after that. Um, it is quite a difficult game, and a special move can easily take off half of your health.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that a well placed Hadouken can take someone down like 75% of their health.
I think they did have kind of like balancing issues there. I mean, that would kind of be corrected in Street Fighter 2. You have a lot more health in Street Fighter 2, and there are a lot more ways to counter a lot of these attacks.
Right.
Um, but yeah, in the first one, those special moves are just absolutely brutal. And if you get hit with a couple of them, you're done.
Yeah, like I watched a video of someone playing through the whole thing, and like when they were fighting Sagat, like they basically were brought down to a sliver of health, and then he had like three-quarters of his health left, and they popped him once and dropped him.
Mm.
It's like it looks like he threw the fight. So yeah, those special moves were way, way too powerful in the first game. But I mean, it was the first game, and obviously it was good enough because it set up, the one of the most re-released games of all time.
Yeah, and with all the releases, I'm surprised that more of these characters didn't appear later on as well. Like the some of them are really really generic,
Right.
but the second guy you fight is like a ninja,
Hmm.
who can kind of like disappear and teleport and like throws like throwing stars and that. I'm surprised that that character hasn't shown up like elsewhere.
Yeah, you'd think it would.
Well, I guess maybe it's because that character uses weapons. Um,
Maybe.
they seem to make a shift in Street Fighter 2 to like hand to hand combat and like no weapons. Aside from Vega, who has his claws, all the other characters in Street Fighter 2 just use kind of like hand to hand and magic projectile attacks.
Right.
There aren't actually any weapons, so maybe that's why. But it was an interesting character, definitely. Um, and like I said, some of them are just generic. The guy you fight in America is just a guy called Joe.
I think one of the guys in England, basically just looked like a skinhead.
Yeah, he's kind of like 9 feet tall as well.
Yeah, he was huge.
One of the things that kind of like Street Fighter 2 did that this one didn't is make sure that every character had their own unique style, and they all had like a quirk, something that you remember them by. And I think that is part of why Street Fighter 2 was kind of like such a success. Is that you had all these individual characters. They weren't like the same as each other, you know. I mean, apart from Ken and Ryu, but they all had their own thing. They all had their own niche, and having that kind of playable roster in a fighting game is really, really healthy for like the competitive scene because everyone will have their main, and that can foster like a really, really decent competitive gaming scene, especially if the game is like well balanced, like Street Fighter 2 is.
Right, and I think it. I mean, it basically laid the foundation for most fighting games that would come out later. I mean, you look at something like Soul Calibur, and it's entirely built around that idea of everyone has their own weapon and their own fighting style. So, that definitely is a big deal for the fighting game history, and this series in particular, because this series would go on to continue to highlight those special characteristics and make everyone feel special, and everyone has that thing you remember them for, even if that thing is just being Ryu.
Yeah. As a fighting game, whilst I found it quite tough, it is an important title, and
Oh, absolutely.
it started a series that is still going to this day, and it's definitely a fun little game, and I can imagine in arcades when it first came out, it was a lot of fun to like sit down and play against someone.
Oh, for sure. Um, Man, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a bad game, because it's unfair to judge it against its sequels, because without this, the sequels wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad game. It's just, if you're used to playing the sequels, it will feel like less. But I mean, for the time, it was great, and it's a very noteworthy and important title. Um, which, I mean, like I said, there's a dozen ways to play it without even having to get new old systems or anything. Honestly, the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, I think, is a great. Yeah, it's a pretty good collection. It's got several versions of the first three games. Well, one version of Street Fighter, and then a bunch of the next few. So I think that's all we have for this one. So we'll take a short break and come back with the next game.
Okay.
So my notes here say that we're talking about the second Street Fighter game, but we already talked about Street Fighter 2 on this show once.
Yeah, we've definitely done Street Fighter 2. That's the second Street Fighter game, right?
Hang on a second. Apparently, there's a game called Street Fighter 2010: The Final Fight that was released a year before Street Fighter 2, making it the actual second Street Fighter game.
Oh, god damn it, Capcom. Okay, yeah, wait, hold on.
So, Street Fighter 2010, The Final Fight, is a side-scrolling action platformer. Was actually released, I think, exclusively for the NES. If this didn't have Street Fighter on the cover, you wouldn't recognize it as a Street Fighter game.
No, it is futuristic. It has aliens, and yeah, it is nothing like it. In fact, in Japan, it was just some random dude called Kevin.
Yeah,
But in the English localization, it's Ken, who 30 odd years after the Street Fighter games is now fitted with a bionic body, so it can still go around doing the fighting and jumping and shit. And he's trying to combat this kind of alien plague or something.
that he technically helped start. It's like something about there's this thing that him and a partner created and is now infecting people like all over the place. I don't know, it's weird.
It is weird.
It's also very difficult.
Yes.
Like I started to play this and I didn't like the way the levels are presented. It's like you go to a planet and you'll say, target versus Ken, and I couldn't even beat the first guy. This game is tough, especially like I'm not good at this kind of thing usually, so it just did not go well.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the stage, what well, I say throughout the stage, like the first stage is just like one screen, but you have to like destroy these. I don't know what they are. They're just kind of like white blobs, but you destroy them and power ups kind of like drop out.
Right.
And you can get up to 5 power ups, and that'll make you like a lot stronger and stuff. And it's one of those games where if you get hit once, you lose. Yeah, you lose like 1 point of life, and you lose like 1 point of power up as well. So you don't really want to get hit, but there's all these rocket things going around as well, and the boss keeps doing these swooping attacks. It's very difficult to not get hit.
Yeah, like you're trying to jump around and get in a position to attack, and it's like so hard to line up shots. You get these things flying around that'll just dive bomb you, and it's just like it's really hard to avoid damage and really hard to hit them.
Yeah, it is. It is a very difficult game, but you know what? This really reminded me of it. It feels like a Mega Man game.
A little bit, yeah. So like when I looked up a video of someone playing the whole game, and like I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, is this Mega Man? Is this Metroid? Is this Contra? Like, what are we doing here? I know it's one of those things where I'm like, you know, to me it was very reminiscent of Shovel Knight in that this has a story and a concept that I'm kind of interested in, but I will in no way ever get to see the rest of it because I'm not good at this type of game.
Mm. With a hell of a lot of saves coming. I managed to get, I think, to the 3rd level, but even with saves coming, I couldn't get further than that. I actually went into the game assuming that it was kind of like a standard platformer. I wasn't expecting to be put in kind of like an arena with a boss and a bunch of ads and stuff like that. But the weird thing is, like all of the levels are kind of different. I mean, you do have that first area which has got a bunch of ads and the boss and stuff like that. The second area is just like a one-on-one boss fight, and then it goes into like a side-scrolling platform level, like an auto-scrolling one, and it kind of like mixes a lot of ideas up, and just with kind of like the amount of enemies and the toughness is really what made me think of Mega Man. But the controls aren't as good as Mega Man, unfortunately.
Right.
But it did for me have that kind of like vibe to it. I think I would have enjoyed it more if it was just like a standard platformer where you go through a level and then fight a boss at the end.
Right.
But it's an interesting concept, not one that I actually enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, like the idea of the story is like there's a cool idea there, but I mean, even like I watched a video of the whole thing, and they don't do a ton with it. So on top of it being super hard to get through, it's just kind of unsatisfying as a story.
Well, yeah, it kind of like sets up sequel bait as well because you kind of like going to all these different planets to chase down this dude that you're trying to kind of like take down, and at the end you get a phone call basically saying you need to come back to Earth. This alien plague is taking over the planet, and that's like where it ends. So maybe they were thinking that it would get a sequel, but like why is this a Street Fighter game?
Right?
Like it doesn't have anything to do with Street Fighter. It almost feels like they got the B team to make a Mega Man game and thought we don't want to put this in a Mega Man series. Let's just call it Street Fighter. And I don't know. It is very very weird.
Well,
It is officially a Street Fighter game, but it has got nothing to do with Street Fighter.
it's very much like a Super Mario Brothers 2 Doki Doki Panic kind of thing, where it feels like they took a completely separate game and just called it Street Fighter.
Mm.
Which that perception is only enhanced by the fact that it was not even Ken in the original game. It was just Kevin.
Yeah, yeah. It's really really weird. Some of the levels as well. Like it's just a single screen where there's like just a void and
Yeah.
a really weird background. And sometimes the level ends immediately. You just jump into a portal and leave. And sometimes frogs start dropping from the sky that you've got to defeat, and then you get into the portal. I don't think they really knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I was gonna say like there's that one screen that sometimes it's just a transition area, and then sometimes it's a boss fight arena. Like just super weird. I mean, like again, it's interesting, um, but not something I'm exactly raring to play again.
And I mean, it should be said as well. Capcom was super optimistic about what 2010 would look like.
Oh, right.
Like there's bionic men and deep space travel, and yeah. And this was like in 1990, so they thought, yeah, this is what everything's going to look like in 20 years.
Yeah. It's like everyone thinking we'd have flying cars by 2000. It's like, well,
I think there's a reason that Capcom kind of like don't really acknowledge this much anymore. Because like I say, it is technically the second Street Fighter game, but they just kind of ignored that when they made Street Fighter 2.
yeah. I think even the things that I've seen have said that it's a non-canon spin-off.
It's not so much a case of Capcom can't count, um, just more a case of they kind of wanted to forget it.
Yeah.
But also Capcom can't count because I actually counted. I did the counting, and next year we're getting Street Fighter 6, which is not counting ports, only counting original named games, is the 36th Street Fighter game, and that's Street Fighter 6.
So you hear that, people that want to bag on Kingdom Hearts, Street Fighter does it too.
And Capcom also do it with Resident Evil as well. Like Resident Evil 8, which came out last year, was not the 8th Resident Evil game. Like well into double figures on that.
That's probably even an even better comparison to Kingdom Hearts,
Mm,
because that's also a series full of nonsense.
yeah.
But yeah, so Street Fighter 2010, interesting idea, not great execution, and I mean, I don't think it's been included in re-releases of anything. Um,
No, I don't think it has. But it probably does have novelty value for people who enjoy the Mega Man games. Because that for me is what it like most closely resembled. I think if you're a big Mega Man fan, then it's definitely worth taking a look at this.
yeah, I mean, there's probably like 5 dudes that are like super into this game.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a speed run of it from like a couple of years ago. So there are still people acknowledging that it exists,
Yeah.
but it's not one that I'm going to be going back to at any point.
No, like I'm might actually go check out some of the later games, because I mean, like I've played Street Fighter 2, and I've played a lot of Marvel versus Capcom, um, but it's one of those things that might be interesting to check out, like Street Fighter 3, Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5. Although Street Fighter 5 has a lot of nonsense in it, so maybe not.
Street Fighter 4 is quite often included in sales on Steam.
Yeah, like, and I mean, yeah, there's ports of it all over the place, so it shouldn't be that hard to get a hold of. Significantly easier to get a hold of than Street Fighter 2010.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's all we really had to say. So we'll take a quick break and come back to finish up.
Okay.
So that's our very very limited look at the Street Fighter series for its 35th anniversary. I mean, it's a good series. Like the games are well regarded. They you know they're still regularly showcased at things like Evo and um, all kinds of other events. Um, Street Fighter 6 is in development. I think they said it's going to come out next year.
Next year, yeah.
Yeah. Um, it looks pretty good. I know people are complaining, but it looks pretty good. Well, okay, I say people are complaining. Certain groups of the fan base are complaining because somebody has more clothes on. But I mean, I honestly, I always preferred that character's outfits that have pants anyway. Um, but no, like Street Fighter's a good series. Well worth checking out at least some of it. You know, Odds are if you've been alive since since 1995, you've played Street Fighter 2. Um,
I mean, don't let us covering the two bad ones like put you off.
Yeah, because I mean, we already talked about the most iconic and re-released version on the show, so we kind of limited our options here.
I
But
mean, the first Street Fighter isn't a bad game. It's
it's not a
just
bad game. It's just like I said, it feels like less when you compare it to Street Fighter 2, but because that's when Street Fighter 2 really that's when the series really found its stride. Um, but yeah, I definitely recommend checking out some variant of Street Fighter, or Marvel vs. Capcom, because those games are great. Now I haven't actually played X-Men versus Street Fighter, which was the kind of the original Marvel vs. Capcom, but I'm guessing that one's okay.
I did play that one in the arcade,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, any game where I get to play as Wolverine, because Wolverine is like canonically the best character in Marvel.
Well,
So
yeah.
so any game that I actually get to play as him is great.
Yeah, I played a lot of the original Marvel vs. Capcom in arcades. usually using Spider-Man and Mega Man. And then I didn't play as much of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in arcades, but that's because the arcades died. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's, obviously played a lot of them on home console, but again, like, you know, it's all good. Like, they found a formula that works and made a boatload of games from it. So check out Street Fighter. Um, Honestly, I think that's all we really have. So until next time, I guess all we have to say is goodbye.
Goodbye.